All right, let's get right into a pretty incredible story of business transformation. We're going to look at how one company, which was really on the ropes, took a sticky, messy byproduct and turned it into a billion-rupee bet on the future of energy. So you might be wondering, what on earth does a sugar mill have to do with the petrol you put in your car? Well, it's a fantastic question. And the answer, it turns out, involves a huge government initiative, a national energy strategy, and one company's incredibly bold plan to pivot from making sugar to creating a kind of superfuel. You know, every great solution usually starts with a pretty big problem. And for this particular Indian sugar company, that problem was getting so big it was threatening their very existence. So, let's set the scene. The year is 2018, and our main character is a company called Oswald Overseas Limited, or OOL for short. Now, they're in the sugar business, which sounds sweet, right? But for them, things were starting to turn pretty sour. And really, the numbers here tell the whole story. I mean, look at this. In 2017, the company lost about 36 lakh rupees. Not great, but maybe manageable. But then, just 1 year later, that loss exploded to nearly 20 crore rupees. They were absolutely bleeding cash. The core business was in serious, serious trouble. But here's the ironic part. The key to their survival was, quite literally, hiding in plain sight. They were producing almost 17,000 metric tons of this stuff called molasses. It's a thick, dark, sticky syrup that's left over from making sugar. Most people just saw it as waste. But the big question became, what if this sticky problem could actually become a high-value solution? It turns out, UCL's crisis couldn't have come at a more perfect time, because right when the company was struggling to survive, the entire country was facing its own energy challenge. And the government's solution to that challenge, well, it was about to change everything for them. The massive opportunity was something called ethanol blending. The Indian government had basically ordered petrol companies to start mixing ethanol, which is a type of alcohol, directly into their fuel. Now, why would they do that? Well, it's kind of a triple win. It helps cut down on air pollution, it reduces how much expensive oil the country has to import, and it creates a brand new market for farmers. This new government policy immediately created this enormous gap in the market. To hit its target of blending 10% ethanol into fuel, India needed more than 313 crore liters of it. The problem? The country was only producing about 155 crore liters. That's a shortfall of more than half. This wasn't just a small opportunity, it was a massive, guaranteed, government-backed market just waiting for someone to fill it. And just like that, OOL's nearly 17,000 tons of molasses didn't look like a waste product anymore. It looked like liquid gold. It was the perfect raw material to produce the exact thing the country was desperate for: fuel-grade ethanol. So, with a huge, guaranteed market just waiting for them, OOL got to work. They drafted this incredibly ambitious blueprint to turn their waste into wealth, to turn molasses into fuel. They weren't just thinking about dipping a toe in the water here, they were planning a full-on cannonball. So here was the plan, the core of the whole project. Build a massive 100 kiloliters per day distillery. But here's the really clever part. It was a multi-feed distillery. That means it was designed to make fuel ethanol from their own molasses, sure, but it could also use grains to make high-quality spirits for the beverage industry. This gave them incredible flexibility and two totally separate ways to make money. So how do you actually turn sticky molasses into fuel for a car? The basic process is actually pretty straightforward. First, you mix the molasses with water to create a sugary liquid called a mash. Second, you add yeast, and that yeast eats the sugar and ferments it into alcohol. Third, you heat that mixture up in a distillation column to separate the pure alcohol from everything else. And finally, you dehydrate it to get all the water out, leaving you with pure, fuel-grade ethanol. But honestly, the most brilliant part of this whole design was its zero-discharge system. See, the main waste product from a distillery is this nasty, toxic liquid. OOL's plant was designed to take that waste, evaporate the water out, and then burn the leftover concentrate in a special boiler. And get this, that burning process would actually generate the steam and power needed to run the entire distillery. It's a completely self-sustaining, closed-loop system. Pretty amazing. All right, so a plan this ambitious, this technologically advanced, it doesn't come cheap. So let's get into the numbers. Let's look at the money behind this massive bet. The total price tag for this new distillery was a staggering 144 crore rupees. Now, to put that in perspective, that's more than 7 times the amount of money the company had lost just the year before. this wasn't just a small investment. This was a go big or go home, bet the company kind of move. So where did they get all that cash? Well, this is where it gets really gutsy. The company leveraged heavily. A full 80% of the costs came from bank loans. They only put up 20% of their own money. Now, that's a huge risk, for sure, but it also tells you something else. The banks were confident that this project was going to pay off big time. And this number right here is why everyone was so confident. The projected profit before tax in the very first year of operation was over 23 crore rupees. I mean, let that sink in for a second. This one project was expected to not only wipe out their 20 crore loss from the previous year, but to make a profit on top of it. That is a 43 crore rupee swing in a single year, a complete and total reversal of fortune. And you know what? It gets even better. The entire 144 crore rupee project was expected to completely pay for itself in just 4 to 5 years. For a massive industrial project like this, that is an incredibly fast return on investment. After year 5, basically every single drop of ethanol they produced would be pure profit. Now, of course, no business venture of this size is a sure thing. Nothing is ever without risk. So let's wrap this up with a balanced look at the huge upsides and the one major threat that was kind of hanging over this entire project. So the strengths were huge. You had a leadership team with tons of experience in the sugar industry. They already had the land, they already had a factory next door, and they had a guaranteed supply of their own raw material. And of course, that very favorable government policy. But that last strength was also the single biggest threat. The entire business model, the whole thing, depended on the government continuing to mandate ethanol blending and guaranteeing a fair price. If that policy ever changed for the worse, the whole operation could be in jeopardy. Ultimately, though, the official assessment from the experts was overwhelmingly positive. This quote from the detailed project report really says it all. The project is well conceived with sound commercial viability. The expected financial returns are quite satisfactory. Basically, it was a calculated risk, but one that everyone agreed seemed destined for success. And you know, this whole case is just a fantastic illustration of both the promise and the potential peril of biofuels. It really leaves us with a much bigger question to think about. As we all search for sustainable energy solutions, can turning crops into fuel really solve our biggest challenges? Or does it just create new problems, new pressures on our food supply, our land, and our water? That's a debate that is far, far from over.